The worst train crash Greece has ever seen. A passenger train colliding head-on with a freight train. Many of the 350 passengers were students returning to Thessaloniki after a long weekend celebrating Greek Orthodox Lent. Many were killed in the initial impact shortly before midnight. Others burnt in a fire so hot it melted metal. Those who made it out were still trying to understand what happened.
I jumped on him, then we fell down. A woman with her child was with us. The train caught fire next to us, and this guy found a hole, so we all managed to get out.
The whole train had bent 90 degrees and had fallen over the cliff. Half of it was hanging in the air and the whole thing was on fire. There were 5 wounded where I was.
Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis was at the scene even as the search for survivors continued.
We are talking about an unspeakable tragedy. Our thoughts today are first and foremost with the relatives of the victims. Our duty is to treat the wounded and from there to identify the bodies. From there, one thing I can guarantee, we will find out the causes of this tragedy and do everything in our power to make sure it never happens again.
Dozens of people stood in line to donate blood at the hospital in the central town of Larissa. And angry families are demanding answers.
We want all those responsible to pay for this mess, this Greek mess. Trains derailing in 2023 is insane and on a double track even from what we hear. They went from a double to a single track and crashed.
A station master has been arrested as investigators try to establish how 2 trains came to be on the same track. Um-e-Kulsoom, Shariff, Al Jazeera.
Now, John Saropoulos is joining us live from the scene of the crash. And we're hearing, John, the Greek Prime Minister has now said that the accident was caused by tragic human error. What more can you tell us?
That would seem to be a reference, Elizabeth, to a purported confession by the Larissa station master who was being deposed today by the city prosecutor. Apparently, the man said that he attempted to switch the passenger train to the second track as it left the station, but that it didn't for some reason respond, the switches didn't work, and he still let the train go on its way without telling anybody else about the problem. Well, if that is true, if that confession is accurate, then that is very much the immediate problem that led to the collision of these 2 trains. Evidently, the station master didn't have any idea that a freight train was heading down the track in the opposite direction, which then raises questions about how well station masters communicate across the Greek passenger network, which is also a freight network. The problem, however, is wider. As we heard from one of the witnesses earlier in that report, it is simply faced with incredulity here that 2 trains should collide in a double-track section of the Athens to Thessaloniki railway network. And this is something that the government has been trying to establish, double track throughout the railway network precisely in order to avoid such collisions. So the problem is also why automatic signalling hasn't been put in place that would have provided another safety layer of safety to warn human operators about oncoming trains or about trains that are on a collision course. And there are still questions to be answered about the sections of the track which remain single and what regime prevails there when a freight train and a passenger train want to use those sections of track. I think there's going to be a lot of questions asked in the coming days and weeks about how Greek rail is organized, and they affect not only the operations but also the infrastructure.
And John, just how have people in Greece been reacting, to this incident, given just how unusual it is for such a high number of deaths from such transport incidents in the country?
Well, there's been an outpouring of sympathy for the victims and for their relatives. long queues of people have been formed here in the city of Larissa to give blood to the hospital. Typically, blood is requested by the national health system whenever there's a disaster. Lots of surgeries to be done, and there's also a lot of verbal sympathy we've heard expressed from people on the street on our way up here. But there's bound also to be outrage over the fact that this thing could happen in 2023 after so many hundreds of millions of euros have been poured in government money and European Union money into improving the Greek rail network.
John, thank you very much for that. That is John Saropoulos with the latest live near Larissa. Thank you.